Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Real Talks, a special edition of Real Talks. I'm your host, David Steele. I do have a guest along with me, which I'll introduce him in just a moment. So, this is the Spoilercast of Across the Spider-Verse. This is the one I promised everybody, and say hello to Matthew. He's going to be joining us today. Um, so I just wanted to you know, put this out there that this was the spoiler cast that I was going to be doing, and that this is going to be a full blown spoiler cast. This is not going to be partials or halfway or anything like that. Everything's out of the bag here. So, guys, if you haven't seen this, go watch it, preferably in IMAX. I'm going to go see it in IMAX shortly, not today, but in the near future.
Make sure
Go
your
watch.
sound quality levels are really great. If you heard about those reports coming in,
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dad. Enjoy the film. So he was
yeah.
in here. Dad is one of the loyal members of the channel, and he's going to go see it. So he's going to come back and watch this. But guys, just go watch it, then come back, and that way you are privy and in the know for everything. Okay, so that all being said, as I said, this is the spoiler cast for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. This is the sequel to the 2019 or
2018.
2018, I stand corrected,
Yeah.
Inside the Spider-Verse, which I watched the other day and I loved. Absolutely loved. And I can understand why people say, oh, this is one of the best Spider-Man movies of all time. Yeah, I can see why. So, anyways, before we get going, there are some reports out there. This one is from the THR, and what the numbers are probably going to be for this weekend. And it's huge. Um, so, according to THR, this is going to be dialed in somewhere in between the 113 and $120 million range. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is spinning a powerful web at the box office. The Sony animation sequel earned a whopping $51.8 million from 4,300 theaters for Friday and projected $120 million plus, well ahead of expectations and one of the top opening of all time for an animated film. The movie, which is easily coming in number one, boasts stellar reviews and audience scores. Sony's weekend estimate is a more conservative 113 and a half. Of course, they're always going to put it on the low end, which would still make Across the Spider-Verse the third largest opening of all time for an animated picture and the best for Sony animation. Friday's Haul, the biggest opening of 2023 so far, which included a $17.4 million in Thursday previews, which I never count, but nonetheless. The second best opening for showing for an animated title behind Incredibles 2's. And that's not a surprise considering the picture is playing an older, more traditional kids animated movie. More than half of Friday's audiences was between the ages of 18 and 34. In 2018, the Phil Lord and Christopher Miller produced Into the Spider-Verse opened at only $35.6 million on its way to becoming a box office sensation, topping out at a little less than $385 million. Across the Spider-Verse once again follows Marvel's Miles Morales, aka Spider-Man, voiced by Shamik Moore, and Gwen Stacy, Spider-Woman, voiced by Haley Stenfield. Across the multiverse of Spider-People, new voice cast members include uh, Isa Ray and more. Lord and Miller are returning as producers and writers, and David Callahan is also writing the screenplay. The movie will be followed by another sequel, Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse, in 2024. Disney's live-action The Little Mermaid will dock at second place in its sophomore weekend with an estimated $40 million. It sounds good, but it's a 66% drop. So that comes in at 4,300, just to the same number of theaters as Spider-Man. The Disney Empire will also take the third spot at the box office with the new horror pick, The Boogeyman. The 20th century pick based on a Stephen King story is looking for a domestic opening between 11 and $12 million. So this is no joke. This is absolutely no joke when it comes to how much money this movie has made and how much this movie is going to make. Um, Little Mermaid, I can understand why. Two-thirds of that
I
audi
don't, but we can move on.
well, two-thirds of that audience was female,
Yeah.
and, so, it dropped like a rock. So,
Mhm.
it is what it is. Um, and I think this is going to now we're gonna get the meat and potatoes of things. Now we're gonna start to really wonder and look at, is this going how bad, when I say bad, what are films going to be able to do in June? Because this is going to be the meat and potatoes of the summer. Okay.
Yeah.
We have, of course, this film, which is going to be huge. Transformers, the 9th, The Flash, the 16th. We've got really an open, if you want to call it weekend, the 23rd. And then, of course, Indiana Jones at the end of the month. If any
Yeah.
one of these films stumble, the week before, and or other pictures are going to be able to take all of those profits, I think, from that.
I
Um,
Yeah. I also want to add too, someone pointed out right before the film started, I was on my phone in a packed theater, by the way, and I was showing my brother Nathan that someone had texted that the last time we had a Marvel film get this high of praise, did really well financially at the box office, at least here domestically. And then 2 weeks later, DC announced they're like, this is our big cinematic event film of the year. And that was Justice League. And this year we got The Flash. So I don't know what's going to happen with some of these releases, and we already talked about this several times, even on the Fast 10 podcast, and how it's really going to be difficult for a lot of these films to make a lot of money. Like, don't be surprised if you hear articles. Once again, don't be surprised if you hear all these articles coming in saying of like, "Oh, this film is underperforming" or "This film tanked," and I'm like, there's a reason why. It's because these studios decided to put all these films, crump them together back to back instead of waiting a couple weeks and allow that money to generate. Now it's almost like, you have to rely on word of mouth to
mhm.
continue. Because now Fast 10 hasn't even made it to, I think as of this recording, it hasn't even made it to 600 million worldwide
Well, don't
um,
forget, Fast 10 is now going to be coming out
on digital.
June 8th on
June
digital,
9th.
June
Yeah,
9th.
June 9th on digital. Yeah.
So,
Um,
that just goes to show you Universal's scared.
yeah. And they should
Universal
be.
is scared, and they need
And
to be.
I'm pretty sure too that they have that, well, whatever mermaid movie that's coming
The Little
out by the end of
Mermaid. Oh
June.
yeah, no, the Mermaid and the Kraken, Teenage
Yeah,
Mermaid and the
whatever it was
Kraken.
called. Yeah, I didn't even know it existed until today when I was watching the trailer. I'm like, when is this coming out? June? I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, so this might flop. So it
Well,
really
I
seems,
find it interesting. I find it interesting that you have two, and I wouldn't be shocked if you actually saw people confuse the two movies, right?
yeah,
Because everybody's talking about the Little Mermaid. They're like, "Oh, this looks, for what it is. This looks great. I really enjoyed it. Oh, I thought this was that other Teenage Mermaid and
I
Kraken." So, I think there could be a little bit of confusion, not a whole lot, but a little bit of
yeah,
confusion. Um, and that being said, I think that, look, Little Mermaid is going to do the numbers. We all know that. It's this, and by the way, this feature was animated too. So,
yeah. And
but
we should also point out too that Across the Spider Verse is now it now holds the record for longest runtime for an American produced animated film at 2 hours and 20 minutes as well.
yeah, yeah.
So
So let's dive right in.
yeah,
So,
sure. Let's go into it.
first of all, you said you were in a packed theater.
Yeah, so I was in a packed theater. My brother and I were there, and so was my dad. We went to like a 140 showing. I had seen since I think you already spoken your thoughts about the first one. I hadn't seen the first film in I want to say 2020 when I showed my grandma the was it second and third Raimi Spider-Man films, and then I showed her Into the Spider-Verse. That was about 3 years ago. But I do remember everything of what happened in it, and I remembered initially when I saw it in theaters, I thought the first one was just good. It was a really well crafted story. I like the visuals a lot, and I wasn't wowed as much as I was until my rewatch when I showed it with my grandma, and I was like, okay, now I totally get it why a lot of people love this so much because it has everything you want from a Spider-Man film, but it's very creative with not just the visuals but the way it tells its story really, really well. Um, and and it's really well told. But yeah, so and then yeah, cut to Across the Spider Verse, and yeah, here we are.
Yeah, no, I saw, like I said, I saw the first one just the other day and really thoroughly enjoyed it and was really hyped. I said, if this is anything going to be like that one, and it's going to be fantastic. I, yeah, just in general, this film, for me, this is definitely going to be the front runner for the Oscar. I mean, hands down, the
Eh,
animation. Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
I mean, it's
I think so.
June. I said this before to Nico Caruso when he assumed that Austin Butler, yes, I'm throwing him under the bus, when Austin Butler was like, "Oh, he's totally gonna win for Elvis," and I'm like, "Guys, it's June. We have 6 months left. Let's wait this out, okay?" Like it's we have another possible Oscar situation that you and I have been teasing for the past like couple months already, but I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, that's different. But I don't know. We'll see because like
Do you really believe, though, in your heart of hearts? First of all, animation, there are going to be. It's not like these are films are going to be. Um, First of all, it has an Academy Award behind it.
sure.
Okay. Second of all, do you really believe that with the number of animated films coming out for the rest of this year, that there is going to be anything better than this?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that with how much sort of like influential power Disney and Pixar have over the animated feature category, I'm led to believe with based on past history, the voters would be like, Disney and Pixar's got a new kids movie coming out around Thanksgiving or Christmas. Okay, let's give it the Oscar.
Yeah.
We'll
No.
see.
And look, I could
But
see
in terms
that.
of quality, I would like to see this win, even though I have my major issues with this because it is a pretty story. But
Yeah.
we'll get into the issues with it. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of too early to talk about like Oscar chances because for all we know, they could snub it. Um,
I would be
you know,
shocked.
I would be
I
shocked
would
too.
be
But
shocked, floored, and flabbergasted. But then
yeah,
again,
we'll have to
I've
talk
seen
later down
crazier
the
things
road, though.
happen.
Yeah.
Anyways, so overall, when you walked out of the theater, what was your first impression?
Okay, so I know what was it? I'm glad that everyone's loving the hell out of this film and they're loving it. They're thinking it's like it's one of my favorite Spider-Man films. Hell, it's one of my favorite films of all time. I thought it was just good. I thought it was good, but the issue in what I had with this compared to the first one, I remembered it being like, yeah, it was a good Spider-Man movie, but I didn't fall in love with it. And it wasn't until I kept rewatching it over and over and saw more the influence and how much this was like, oh wow, it's actually a different, fresh take on Spider-Man, which it is. This one, my big issue, well, the two biggest issues I had with it was one, it's 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I thought by the time we get to the part where we see, and Dave's already said this is a spoiler podcast, so whatever.
Go ahead.
But by the time we got to the part where Miguel, I think it was it, yeah, oh, no, I'm sorry, excuse me, Miles Morales meets Miguel, and he tells him, "Oh yeah, you screwed up, and you caused this whole canon problem going on with this world that you weren't supposed to mess with." That was about, I think we had like roughly an hour left of the film or so, and that's where things started to get much interesting for me because up to that point, I liked the Gwen Stacy stuff, and I thought, okay, like this is just by the time we got to the credits, and like, okay, I thought, oh, okay, that's a prologue, and now we're gonna get into the Miles Morales stuff, and we're gonna get into that world pretty quick. I felt like leading up to that part where Miguel is introduced to Miles, I thought some of that was very slow. In that, I understand that they want to set up elements of the next film, but I thought you could have told it in a faster way to get us because like I get that like it's a part one of a part two, and I'll get to that in of itself in a minute. Um but I need you to get faster to the story because there were parts like as cool as it looked, and it's like, yeah, it's cool to see Gwen Stacy and Miles Morales hanging out together. I'm like, can we speed this up a little bit to get into the story? Um, because I just wasn't quite like as emotionally hooked as I was with the first Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, where I was hooked from it, the moment it started all the way to the end. This one, it took me a while to get there. I'm like, okay, come on. And the second biggest issue I had with it, and we also talked about this too, I think a little bit, maybe briefly on Fast 10, but I always have an issue when stories decide when a franchise does a first installment, has first has a beginning, middle, and end. Then for your sequel, you decide, like Matrix, like what was the other one? Pirates of the Caribbean. You decide to tell your big story that is just way too much for one film, and you got to split it into two parts. And I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to judge this film overall because it's only one half of a story. And by the time we get to that, by the time I we got to that, the most interesting part of this part one story was about an hour left into the film, I would say, or hour and a half, or however long it was. And I was like, all right, cool, all right, let's finish this. And then it ends, and I was okay with where they ended, but at the same time, it just makes me think like, okay, like I always have this issue with like whenever they split these stories into two parts, it's like I need I need something. I need a bit more out of this. In fact, and again, it's kind of hard to judge this movie overall just because we don't even know where part two is going to go. And so far, the only ones that have been successful at splitting these stories into two parts, along with like these big intellectual properties, are, I want to say it was the Avengers when they did an Infinity War and Endgame, and the what was it? Harry Potter, Deathly Hallows
Yeah.
Part One and Part Two.
Yeah.
Like they had their own story, they had their own arc, and so does this with Gwen Stacy. But I don't know. It's always going to be an issue with me whenever you do a part one and part two. It's almost like, wait a minute, hold on. I kind of have to judge you a lot more than if you were just a complete story,
No.
because you need to have something there for me to grasp onto. And it did. Admittedly, they did have an arc with Gwen Stacy and what happened with her, and it technically is her story because we don't even get to Miles Morales until about 15, 20 minutes into the film, which I was okay with. I just, that was really the two biggest hangups I had with it, was that there wasn't really a whole lot interesting or new stuff going on until about an hour left into the film. Um, and again, it's a part one. So it's like, all right, I can't really confidently give it a higher rating, or, or go as high as I could with everyone else until I see where the conclusion is.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's just me,
So
but whatever.
yeah. So right off the start, I really like how this film opens. When you made a point of it to where, um, you know, this is Gwen's story,
Yeah.
and for the first 10 to 15 minutes, we're basically seeing Gwen, and how she's fighting this villain, and how she's trying to grow up, and how she's getting used to life without Miles and everything else, and so that really worked for me. We started to really see Gwen's life after Miles and after what happened. Um, the whole beating of the drums. I mean, just even that opening. We get to see everything. So that was great. I really thoroughly enjoyed that. And you're right. I didn't have a problem with just Gwen.
Yeah.
Um, so we get she, you know, once she fights the villain, and once the other spider people come in, and they, finish the villain, and she gets this device, that's when things start to, really pick up. I mean, it's that scene where, you know, Miles is in his room laying down with his headphones on, and the portal opens up.
Yeah.
And so it's like, hey. And of course, he's surprised. And this movie made me laugh too, out loud quite a few times.
There were
I've
some
got to
funny
say that.
moments. Yeah.
Um, this was it wasn't overly funny. It was picking and choosing its moments, and that was really good.
Yeah.
Um, and it made me laugh. I mean, just the scene where, he's got a crush on her and he's like, "Oh, this is your drawing book," and things like that. That all being said, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie for what it was. Um, so I should back up and say this. So anybody who isn't familiar with the first movie, okay, um, the two main characters in this are Haley Stenfield and Shamik Moore, and
Mm.
so they are the. I mean, you have a lot of other um, voices. Okay, Oscar Isaac, and a lot of other
Jake Johnson.
Jake Johnson.
There's a
So
couple
I
other
mean,
ones.
Daniel Kaluuya is in there.
Yep.
So Brian Tyrese Henry. So I mean, this was you had a lot of other different um, people in there as well, except that these were, I mean, it's a Gwen and Miles story.
Miles.
So that's that. Um, so the story was great. I love the story. Once again, as I said, it made me laugh out loud a few times, um, and at the right times too. Just when you think things are starting to get serious, it throws you a little curveball, and the whole thing. So what Miles is really starting to, because he's Spider-Man now and everything else, and one of the cooler scenes was when basically we see this thing come in and try to rob a convenience store.
Yeah.
And so, you know, all we see is the little thing go in the microwave and it's a little, burrito or whatever it is, and it
It's
just
called, yeah, they call it the spot, which was
yeah,
yeah.
no, the spot, absolutely, yeah. And so the little thing's twirling around in the microwave, and then he picks it up and he starts fighting the spot. We don't really know what or how this happened. I think the problem might have been that um, it didn't tell you immediately who this villain was. It was trying to give you a little bit of backstory of who this spot was, how they got there,
Yeah.
and why it happened. And I
Mhm.
think that might have been why it didn't land. I
I
didn't
I
have a
w-
problem with it.
yeah, I was okay with them holding the backstory until like the crucial moment before he leaves as to like who he was and such. I was fine with that. It was just all the stuff regarding with um Miles in of itself. I was like, okay, like we could like with within his own personal life. Like I get it, it's a struggle for Spider-Man. And maybe that's because I've already seen the other Spider-Man films to be like, yeah, it sucks being Spider-Man, and it's kind of tough to juggle two jobs, being Spider-Man and then being a college kid, and doing what going to all these like graduate schools and such. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I thought that they had already established that with him being late at the interview that he had on campus. I was like, okay, you
Yeah.
established that, but then they can continue doing that again with the whole they're late for his dad who's about
Well,
to be
that was
captain
the
in a
thing.
couple
That was
days.
the running joke.
Yeah,
That was the running joke. Is that she says, you're 5 minutes late here or you're 5 minutes late there,
yeah.
and that was the whole gag.
I guess I just
And
didn't think it was funny. Maybe that was why I
okay,
was like
and
I wasn't as
so
invested.
you know, so don't forget, like this scene here when so he finally comes in, settles down, and you have the counselor basically saying, he's got an A in this and blah 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 and a B, and that's when the mom goes, "What?"
Yeah,
And so, it's one of those things where he has his little spidey sense tingling, and then, he sees the spot outside again because he wrapped him up earlier.
yeah.
And so he has to go fight the spot again. And this is when things start to go a little haywire. And so I, I really didn't. And the other thing too is, so this was more of a coming of age story because you had the parents, okay, who basically did not want to see, and this was touching. It was sweet, okay, and it was life too because you had, I mean, it's that whole scene to your point about where the father is, going to get this big promotion to captain and everything else, and everybody's on the rooftop, and that's the gag is that Miles is gonna go get these cakes made, and he gets the cakes, and then he's running up the stairs and trying to, get a change into his regular outfit, and
Mhm.
he's like, "Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry," and he opens the cake, and so it says, yeah, "I'm not proud."
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where they were able to manipulate that, do that. I thought that was hilarious. Um, and it's just one of the things where even his father was trying to set him on the right path and be like, "Look," and that's the scene in the counselor's office. He's like, "Look, I," because she doesn't want him to go to Princeton,
Yeah.
and she says, "You guys have always taught me that if there are other people out there that can teach me something and I to do what I want to do, then go do that." And so that's really that is the moral of the whole film, really, is being able to not only have an adventure, so to speak, but go do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Don't ever let, and that's that scene, later on when they meet Gwen, okay, and it's one of those things where they're on the rooftop, and she basically says, "Look," and there's that touching moment. Don't ever change.
Mhm.
Don't ever let anybody tell you you can't do anything, because it's very difficult for them to try to let go of their son because they're
Yeah.
growing up because of Gwen. And even Gwen, okay, who has her own problems because her father, okay, who's a captain, is hunting down this Spider Woman in her universe.
Yeah.
And the thing about that is that, you have, so they're trying to figure out who this Spider Woman is. And that's that scene where basically she says, "It's me." And of
Yeah.
course, he's taken aback by that. Like, what am I supposed to do?
Mhm.
And so that's where the dilemma comes in. I mean, I it was a morality thing because obviously you don't want to turn your own children in, but it's
Yeah.
another thing that you're like, why are you risking your life type of thing? I'm trying to be
Mhm.
protective of you. And so, and even she says that in the thing and says, there's nobody else. You're the only one like me.
Yeah.
And that's why they have such a connection to each other. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, and I did like the whole Gwen Stacy and the Captain Stacy, or that it's revealed by the end, like, oh yeah, I actually gave up my job because becoming a father to you was more important than being a cop. The fact that, like, here you are, you're already dedicated to this job, and here I am as a cop, and I'm kind of contradicting, the things that I'm doing. I'm like, if I'm going to arrest you, then I might as well not have been your father. And
Hmm.
he clearly didn't want to lose that connection with her, um, because she was the best thing that ever happened to him. Um, and I thought that was interesting. And yeah, and it kind of teases a little bit of what might happen with Miles Morales with Beyond the Spider Verse, which we'll get next year. Um, and in terms of, like, maybe this could actually turn out well, because he even brings up the fact that, like, don't tell your parents that you're Spider Man, because that didn't
Well,
end well for me. But
once again, okay, that's the
yeah.
and that's how they make everything so serious they can make it a gag. Okay, like the scene where he comes in and she comes in ready to do laundry, and he zippers up the coat and is like, you know, there's these awful things coming and everything else, and he's like,
Mhm,
she says, "Well, you can tell me anything,"
mhm,
and he's debating, and meanwhile, Gwen is
mhm.
sitting outside, hanging outside, knowing what's going on, and he says, "Okay, I'm Spider Man," and her reaction's like, "Huh? Who?"
Yeah.
And that's the gag. Like, he just dropped a huge bombshell, and the mother is like, huh? And
Yeah, and it
completely, you know,
and
you
at
did
that
you
point, it's
laugh at
revealed
that?
that he No, I didn't. It was just more like I was just kind of confused. It's like, oh, okay, because she's not out in the world like her like their dad was it the dad is because he's a police officer and she works at a hospital. And I just saw it more as like, oh, okay, well, it kind of makes sense. She doesn't really hear a whole lot about Spider-Man or know exactly who Spider-Man looks like. And then it's revealed, oh no, he's in the wrong universe.
Yeah, no, no.
They
Well,
pulled
that
they
well, I'll
pulled
give that.
y-
Hey, Meadow, how
yeah.
are you? No, I'm glad you enjoyed it, as did we.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where that I thought was brilliant. That
Yeah.
I thought was absolutely genius. So my only problem, major problem. I mean, I won't say there were other minor little things. My only major problem with this film is that I thought that train sequence was a little too long. I think so.
The
One that
Towards the end
so
with
yeah,
being chased by
yeah,
I actually thought that was the right amount of pace,
yeah.
honestly.
No,
It
so
was
I thought that
like
was a little too long, and at that point, once he gets sent back, and I'm like, okay, I knew that something was not, right. And then, he sends Gwen back to her, or what we think is
timeline.
her universe, and that's that. I thought that was brilliantly done. Like each knew exactly where the other, not exactly, but had an idea, and their spidey sense was tingling. It's like, oh, he's in the wrong universe.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, she's in his universe, and it's like, oh. And
Well,
so
no. No, no, no. She
she's in a
was sent
different
back.
universe.
Yeah, she was sent back to her own timeline, and then she got a gift from Daniel Kaluuya's Spider-Man, stating, "Here's this like little collider or
Yeah,
whatever
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
wristband
the
to go
collider.
through the
That's right.
timeline." And then she went into Miles's timeline, assuming that that's where Miles was hiding.
Yeah,
Yeah, because she knew that all the other Spider-Men were going to go after him in his own timeline, assuming that's where that was.
yeah.
Um,
I was so
yeah, no,
happy.
I agree with Metal in that it was a very natural response in that because if he had gone for a more overreaction or went crazy on her, it would have felt more like we got to create like a problem within the film, but not but it would but that way would have felt very unnatural.
Right.
Whereas the way that they reacted, it was like, okay, that's how actual humans would be.
Yeah.
Because even the dad in it was kind of crazy at first, but then sort of took some time away, from when Gwen left him all the way to when Gwen finally saw him at the apartment. I was like, okay, now it's a couple of days have gone by. He's probably simmered down a bit, So
Yeah. No, I just no, I did like that. I did like that a lot. And it was
yeah,
one of those things where I immediately knew that he was not Miles was not in the right timeline
yeah,
because of the fact, not where he landed, or it was raining, or I mean, although that could have been an indication. However, it was more of, the mother was, you know, so the mother was a nurse, obviously doing her overnight, and then you see the door open, and then of course, in ho- the I gotta say one thing about this: the animation of this movie, and I know we were talking about it earlier, was incredible. It
yeah.
was second level, top tier, top quality animation. And just that shot of this figure with these
With the
white
shadow.
eyes with the shadow. And I went, okay, I know exactly who it is. And of
Mhm.
course it ended up being Aaron, his
Yeah,
uncle from the first film that died, that was a prowler. And immediately that's when you know that, okay, he's not in the right universe. And so then, Aaron, walks over, and he Miles just trying to play it cool. He's like, "Hey, Uncle Aaron," gives him a hug and everything else. And um, Ben Riley was hilarious. I'm using my triceps. Yeah, yeah. It's but so he basically he was he was trying to play it cool.
yeah,
And so that's when he's like, I've got the shopping list. I got to take care of this. And so, of course, when he starts to glitch, you know, and then they look at each other, and then Aaron knocks him out, and of course that leads to the ending, which we'll get to in a little bit. But there are certain shots here. Almost every single shot in this movie could be a frame. I mean,
Sure.
this is the one that, and I've used this several times tweeting it. This is the one shot that everybody, I mean, because first, you got to understand, it's a coming of age story. They're starting to grow up and they're starting to realize, okay, it's who they are. Um, and I love the fact that his hand was creeping over, and then was going back.
It,
He didn't
it
know what to do, type of thing. He was
yeah,
falling
it
in
was
love.
it was nice visual storytelling where she talks about how in every universe Gwen always gets to be with Spider-Man, but it
Except
doesn't
this
always
one.
turn out so well. Yeah, and except that it usually doesn't turn out well for them together. Um, so yeah, no, I thought some of that was good. I yeah, like I just yeah, I thought that was good. I guess for me, I agree with you that the animation's always really fucking good. With this and the first one, but I guess I'm a bit more critical of kids movies, and I just realized now, actually, with the exception of Guardians 3, I haven't really been on here enough to review like kids movies in general to tell you what my thoughts on them altogether. In that, I'm at a point now where I'm a little bit sick and tired um of some of these kids films to where and don't get me wrong, this wasn't one that I could loop in with these other kid films that I kind of hate now, where it's like the Pixar issue that they've had the last 10 to 15 years, in that there's a lot of great animation, has a great style to it, story and characters are very flat, in that I don't care about the story and I don't care about the characters. And I did like the story for this. I did like the characters. I'm a little bit worried for the third one, though, that I'm not going to be as invested with the characters and story. Just because it's because I'm seeing a lot of people talking about the animation, like, oh my god, it's so cool. But I like I said, I thought in comparison to the first one, I thought the story and characters here were a little bit weaker compared to the first one. And I get it; it's trying to do a whole. We got to tease it up for the big finale for part two. Um, but that's just something I'm kind of a little bit like, all right, I'm kind of past that now. With these kids films, these animated kid films, of like, you need to have a really good story and a really good animation style. Otherwise, I'm just not really gonna give a shit about your film. But again, like I said, I'm not lumping it in with those films I just described. What I don't like, especially from the later Pixar years. But at the same time, it's something that I'm a little bit more aware of more people, complimenting, like you did, David, about how the animation's really good. But I'm like, okay, yeah, the animation's good, but I like I said, I need more from you. But still,
Yeah, I
that's just me.
mean, but that's the thing, though. I mean, I think. w- So they are going to be doing a live action Miles Morales film. I mean, they've already
Oh,
announced it and everything else. Okay.
yeah,
And so for me, okay, if you're going to do, for me, okay, I personally would not like this because I think it would take away from the animation. Okay. That is, that's why this is an animated, and they can get away with this in animated. Okay. Yes. And when I say, and plenty of other people or whatever, is this is incredible animation and everything, because it's every single one of the, I guess the fact is this: a couple things. Number one, you can only compare apples to apples, right?
yeah,
From 2018 to this. That's A. B, the reason is too that the story, you were just being introduced to Miles Morales and Gwen Stacy in the first film. So that's why it was like, okay, this is really good. So the continuation of that story may seem a little flat, for lack of a better word. Okay.
yeah,
But it's not about the at the end of the day, while the story is important, and look, I'm all about story every day and twice on Sunday, but
Yeah.
I think that, you know, I think that's what it is. I think that this is not a kids movie, and I know you just said that, but this isn't a kids movie. This is more of a young adult movie, and
Even though it's
because
PG here in the United States.
well, I mean, just because something's PG doesn't make it necessarily, um, while it is kid friendly. Spider-Man, and I agree with you. I mean, I'll get to that in just a minute, Metal. I totally agree with you about that because there was something behind that. Um, but the fact is that this is more of a young adult movie. Spider-Man is the most popular superhero, and Miles Morales is the most popular superhero ever since 2018.
Yeah, well,
And
and
so
yeah,
I think
and
that this is, this, I don't know, was a good fit. What,
yeah.
yeah, for me at least. I
I
mean,
I wa and I was gonna say too, to add on to that though, like there's a reason why Sony wanted to obtain the rights for Spider-Man, not just because they didn't want something as conglomerate and hugely massive as Disney taking over it, but they also wanted their own little story, like and the other thing too about this, and like I said, at the end of the day, I did like this one overall. I just didn't love it as much as the first one. But also, I have to say too is that now that you've shown off how wide your films are, these two Spider Verse films are, even though they are, in my opinion, generated for a more kid friendly crowd, maybe a young adult kiddish like the Harry Potter films were. It kind of shows me like, okay, you guys can't slip up when you do stuff like Venom and Morbius. Like, you can't just say, "Oh, let's half-ass it. Let's just throw a bunch of computer effects together and there's our film." It's like, no, sorry. I expect more from you guys. Like, I get it. Like, it's like Sony, but like different. It's a different like subdivision or
well, it's
department
the
doing
major
these, but
difference
still.
is the major difference is it's live action. That's what it
Yeah, but
is at
but
the end of the
but
day.
but the other thing too is that they're not putting enough effort or energy into making those films creative and fun, whereas these two they are.
Well, I
Just in their
mean,
visual style presentations alone.
I would agree with you. Look, Morbius, nobody's going to argue with you. Morbius was a mess. I will. That's just
Even
you know
Tyrese even Tyrese Gibson said it sucked too.
I mean, it was a mess.
Yeah.
Um, so RL comes in and says film was great. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
enjoyed it, and I'm glad you enjoyed it as well. And so there's something else to be said too. So getting back uh to that, he says Matthew facts. Uh,
Yeah.
but the thing is that one of the one of the cool things about this was that they were able to take all it was like they had that Spider-Man game and took all of these different things, okay? Whether it was the animated one or the 2099 one or, and
You're talking
they
about
were
throwing them in that Spider-Verse
yeah,
in
and put them in
reality?
that
Okay.
Spider-Verse. And so to your point about the cameo, okay? I thought the cameos, okay, because did your crowd get a reaction when the cameos came up?
I remember my brother and my dad were pretty reactive when they saw the Garfield and they saw Maguire, and I pointed
Yeah.
them out too. The others I wasn't too familiar with. I know the Insomniac Spider-Man because I played some of that game,
Yes.
and Donald Glover I recognized.
Yeah.
I mean, how the hell could you not if you
Yeah,
it
right.
you
No,
know
I love that.
um
I didn't say anything, but I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And I'm thinking to
yeah
myself, they're just taking they're plucking all these things out of the Spider-Man game, and they're throwing them in there. And
yeah he
RL says they need to make the directors who directed this film in charge of Sony Marvel products.
I
Well, I think that so um there's two different things. Okay. You have Amy Pascal, okay, and then you have I'm sorry, how do you it's Ari
uh
Ardman. So he's the producer. So you have one in to your
Avi
point,
Arvid,
RL,
yeah.
right. So you have the producer of the Sony, okay, and you have the producer of the Marvel side of it. So and because it was a combination, so to speak, I mean, it wasn't like a No Way Home type of thing. Okay. And that's the other thing, too. This was animated. So you have, this was because it was Sony, it's Sony's IP to start. They have, I believe, and I could be wrong about this, they have the rights to all the animated stuff. Now, when it comes to certain other things like live action, okay, they can actually put, um, there's a combination. They can both creatively have that. So, yeah, I could see that. But like I said, that whole sequence was really cool.
Well,
And
and uh, to add on to the comment that someone stated about why don't they get the directors on board for the Sony verse? The issue is though is that as good as these directors are, and they did a good job, I think at the end of the day, to me at least, I still think of this more as Phil Lord and Chris Miller's baby because they were the ones who not only produced the film, but I'm pretty sure one of them had co-wrote. I think it was Phil Lord co-wrote the first film, and they both co-wrote the second film, and they produced both too. So, as much as we want to give credit to the directors, which we should, Kemp Powers and the other two guys, who did a really good job with the film visually and telling the story as it was. I think at the end of the day, it's Phil Lord and Chris Miller that are making these films what they are because they're introducing this really cool animation style that was presented a little bit in Mitchell's versus the Machines, which they also produce as well. Um, and it's really, like I said, it's their baby. So if anything, I would say, contact them. I mean, again, you should also contact these directors so that we get, they can get payable jobs going forward. But still, um, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just that's my thoughts on that whole statement or comment. Oh, you're unmuted again. Yeah, there you go.
as long as they're able to collaborate and I mean, regardless of, and this is where it gets very dicey for IPs
Yep.
because you're able to do this, but you're not able to do that, and you're able to do that, but you're not able to do the other thing. And Meadow says, after seeing this, I kind of want. So they are doing a Spider Woman movie now. I don't know if that's going to be a whole Gwen movie in itself.
I don't think it is.
I don't think it is. But I do think that if they're
I'm
going
looking it up
to,
right now.
if they're going to do some sort of Spider Woman movie, I think that it's going to be because there are other characters in this universe you could actually do. Okay, and I think the Spider Woman movie, okay, is going to be um Isa Isa Ray's movie. I believe she is the one. I could be wrong. Um, so she is Spider Woman. Yeah. So what they're going to do is they're probably going to make a film of how he and her met. Okay, because they're together, and so that to me is what they would probably do, and that's just a hype. That's a complete guess in itself,
Well,
but
I was gonna say that right now, I forgot we're actually getting a Madam Web film in which Dakota Johnson is playing Madam Web and Sydney Sweeney from Euphoria is playing Spider Woman. But it's like a different Spider Woman character.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
So, but
that's in.
I wouldn't hold my breath too much for some of these films outside of the Spider Verse movies that they're doing, the animated stuff. Everything else that Sony's doing, I'm like, I like the Craven the Hunter movie. I'm like, I
No,
doubt
I,
it's gonna be
I
good.
I have no desire to. I'll be honest. I have no desire to see that, and that's just me personally.
Yeah,
Maybe it
same.
might be good, but I
I don't
mean,
think it
there's
is.
well, no. I mean, first and foremost, it's rated R, which you've already isolated a ton
Which you
of
should have. Which
your
I'm
audience.
sorry, but you should have done that for the Venom movies and Morbius,
Well,
because that's kind of the point of their characters.
yeah. I
But
mean,
also you're hiring the guys who wrote. Uh, well, I'm looking through here. At least they're working on a Madam Web. But you. Oh no, okay. So you're hiring the guys who wrote Dracula Untold, The Last Witch Hunter, and Gods of Egypt to do Morbius. And I'm like, of course you're gonna get the film you're gonna get, which is a bad
Well,
movie.
I
So
mean, it is. I mean, look, this cast is, you know, it's funny because they have some decent names in there. Okay, I mean, like Ariana DeBoe's going to be in it, Russell Crowe's going to be in it, and Eric Taylor Johnson's going to play who we imagine be Craven. But
yeah, it's Craven.
nonetheless, yeah, I remember hearing about the Madam Web movie and the Craven movie. Not happy. No, I don't blame you. I don't blame you, and I don't think a lot of people are, because forget about the fact that it's going to be rated R, and
Yeah.
forget about the fact that nobody knows Craven.
Well,
Nobody.
and I'll yeah. Well, unless you're into the spider lore, like
Well,
one of
yeah,
my
I mean,
cousins were.
unless you're a deep dive into the Spider Verse and everything else, and that's why everybody, that's why they did Carnage
Yeah.
as their next movie.
Well, and
Venom versus Carnage,
yeah,
even
I
though it
should
was
also
live action.
yeah. The two writers I just pointed out, they were the ones who were doing the Madam Web Spider-Man movie. The writers of the Craven the Hunter film did Punisher Warzone, the last Transformers the Last Night, Men in Black International, and Uncharted. Okay, yeah, so Craven's gonna suck.
Yeah,
I
I think the play might be a shit show. Yeah, I
Blade
mean,
might suck, but
I I
we'll have
I
to
don't
see
know
because
if
it's
it's
like the
gonna be a shit show.
MCU.
I mean, that we there's so look, they don't even have a full script done.
Yeah, and they're in
So
the middle
I
of
mean,
trying to rewrite that during a
so I
strike, I think.
mean,
So
yeah, I mean, I can't wait for Beyond the Spider Verse. Yeah, so I mean, so
yeah,
let's talk about the ending real quick, because I think the
sure.
ending is something that. So after the scene where they realize they're in the wrong universes, Gwen talks to his parents, and I did like the running joke too of him being grounded, and they always kept re-upping the number of
It
months.
it was a little funny when she's like, "All right, when you see him, tell him 5 months," and I'm like,
Yeah,
"All right, that was funny. All right,
yeah,
that's a
no,
little
that
funny."
was pretty cool. That being said, so he gets knocked out. We see him tied to the bag, and
Which is very reminiscent of the first Spider-Man with Peter B. Parker
mhm,
when he's tied up to the bag as well. There were a couple of times I was like, "Oh wow, you're actually kind of playing into it." Like the one aspect I did like about Beyond the Spider-Verse was that it was Miles Morales who was in not only in another universe but was experiencing what Gwen Stacy, Peter B. Parker, Spider-Ham, and all these other characters had to deal with like getting glitched out of the system every couple of minutes, affecting their abilities in and themselves. And I thought, all right, that's kind of cool. Um, and I thought that was interesting, especially with this one. And then, like I said, he's going through what Peter B. Parker went through, where he's like, not only is he in another dimension, but again, just dealing with the stuff that he's got to deal with. So,
yeah. So I mean, then you see, Uncle Aaron. I'm not who you think I am.
yep.
I'm going through some dimension, and then of course, what ends up happening is you see somebody else come out from the shadows, puts on the
Which is
glove.
that universe's Prowler. Aaron's not even the
Exactly.
Prowler at all. He's just an
And then,
uncle
of
to.
course, the big
Yeah.
reveal, he takes it off, and it's Miles.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, okay. So now you kind of know where the next one's going to go, is what you were
Yeah.
saying earlier. But as long as it's not done too badly, I guess, and they don't do it too long, they ended this at just the right spot, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and
So
the other thing I'm worried about, which was kind of my issue with when they did the pirate sequels, at least when I was rewatching Dead Man's Chest and At World's End, is that they feel very different, and that like where Dead Man's Chest ended, like what the goals are going to be set up for the next film is like, oh, you think that's how the story is going to be in At World's End, but when you watch At World's End, it's like, no, it's even more convoluted, complicated story that was like wasn't even established at all in the previous sequel. It's like that really is like the biggest. It goes back to my issues of like splitting a story into two parts,
yeah,
is that
the-
they need to feel natural in terms of, you need, like, yes, you need to set up your goals, but don't but and set up the ideas for the next one, but don't try to overcomplicate it or say like, oh yeah, those goals, and no, that wasn't the reason. that wasn't the reason why we had to, get Jack Sparrow. Like we had to do it for this other complicated thing. So,
Yeah.
you know,
The ending took me off guard. I thought his dad was the Prowler, and then it threw me for a loop. Yeah. I
I,
mean,
I, I yeah, I kind of figured his dad was dead in that universe because I'm like, oh, Aaron walked in. I'm like, oh, okay, so you're essentially doing like an alternative 1985 from Back to the Future 2, where instead of where the mom marries Biff, um, and yeah, so
yeah, no, I thought that was interesting. I mean, I kind of figured he was in a different universe, but then of course you see the mural and everything else. Do you think Tom Holland will make an appearance in the next film? Animated film?
um,
No.
if his film career keeps tanking, I think he'll just keep playing Spider-Man for the rest of his career.
No, I don't think. I mean, no. See, and the reason being is this. I think that he is only going to do live action. I mean, look, if they really
He could pop
wanted,
up for a cameo like they
well,
did
no, no,
with the
but
Venom
okay. So to
character.
your point, I would say this. I would say this. If they're going to do some sort of cameo type of thing, it's going to be like what you saw with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, whatever else.
Yeah.
It's not going to be an extended thing, or okay, or they might have him in the next, multiverse type of situation where he's voicing one of the characters briefly. It's only going to be a couple lines. That's it. It's not going to be an extended one, and it's not going to be a long one.
Yeah.
Um, he says, no, Tom says he doesn't want to play Spider Man past 30. He said it right after No Way Home. Yeah, then, we can move
I'll
on.
see.
I mean, the thing is that it, look, he was doing this for, not he was doing this. This is what he's going to be defined for. Okay. Tom Holland will always be known and defined for Spider Man at the end of the day.
Excuse me. No, no, no. It's Spider Boy, not Spider Man. Spider Boy.
Well, I
Okay.
mean,
I
here's the
don't give a
thing.
shit what the title says. It's Spider Boy to
Well,
me.
I would rather have, but they actually went out and got somebody that looked the part.
Sure.
For
No, they totally
me,
did.
a big portion of it is you have to look the part. And
Yeah.
Tobey Maguire, even back in '02, didn't look the part. He looked like a 21, 22, 23-year-old guy.
Yeah. He
Spider-Man
played.
is supposed to be, a high school. Peter Parker is supposed to be a high school,
Mhm.
and that's why all those other films did so well. Is
He
most
was able to. He was
besides
able. Well, I was going to say he was able to play the dorkier, nerdy Peter Parker well from the comics, but you really couldn't buy him as Spider-Man. Whereas it was kind of the reverse for Garfield, where he seemed too confident to play the cocky, nerdy kind of character. But when he donned the Spider-Man persona, it's like, oh wow, that's Spider-Man from the comics.
yeah,
At
no,
least
I
that's how
mean,
I felt.
I think that um yeah, that's just me. So I have no problem with Tom Holland playing Spider-Man. I mean, I think he was, and look, he was 23 or 24 at the time. He got away with it. And it worked. And the other thing is too, throughout the three films, you had the progression of him going through high school. The first year he was a sophomore in um not Far From Home. Um the first film, okay?
Homecoming.
Then yeah, Homecoming, thank you. And then he was a junior in Far From Home, okay? And then he was a senior, okay,
In No Way Home,
in No
yeah.
Way Home. And so I think that there was that worked. That worked for the progression because he was young enough that he was like 23, 24, that he wasn't going to age out of it. And one of the biggest things is you don't want somebody aging out of the character. I know Haley Stanfield and Oscar Isaac play other Marvel characters, but they would be great as characters. They played them in the Spider Verse live action. Eh, You know,
I
that's the thing. I mean,
I don't I don't remember what Haley Steinfeld played in the other
she was in
Marvel characters.
no, not Hawkeye. Yeah, she was in Hawkeye.
Oh, I forgot about that. I didn't even
Yeah.
watch the show. Okay, got it. All
So
right.
yeah, so she played Kate Bishop. So I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, but here's the thing. You look, and Oscar Isaac, you know, with Moon Knight and everything else, I would rather just keep them separate. and not you don't you because you want to be known if you're in the MCU, okay? You want to be known for one role, whether it is, Robert Downey Jr. for Iron Man, or Chris Evans as Captain America, or Haley Stanford as Kate Bishop, or Oscar Isaac as Moon Knight. The minute you start to mix it up and start to take more stuff on, even though you're part of the MCU type of thing, that starts to get very dicey and very, things. I mean, now, look, if you want to do like a cameo type of thing, like a Tom Holland coming in for the next film to voice a couple lines, that's cool.
Yeah.
Although I only believe how long does how long does Sony have control of the Spider Verse? So Sony has that's their IP, their intellectual property. Okay, they were only loaning it out, so they gave it to Marvel, but Sony has distribution rights and everything else. Marvel can borrow the character for certain things, but they can't do other things with it. That and anything creatively, anything that Marvel wants to do, Sony has to approve. And that being said, oh, it's too early to tell. It's too what are the It's too early to tell.
Yeah, way
It's
too
way
early.
too
Like
early to
the
tell.
film just came out like a day ago,
Yeah,
guys. Come
I mean,
on.
look.
It's
It's
like
I'm gonna
asking me what are my predictions for Fast 11, which we might
yeah
even get another one in between that.
yeah. So I mean, I would say this you it's way too early to tell. I would say this, RL. It's going to depend on what this film fully at the end of its run, whatever it makes. So let's say this makes 500, $600 million. Okay.
Which
Then you
would
can
be
kind
more
of
than the first
say,
one, I think.
yeah. Okay. Then you can kind of say, okay, well, you know, um, that would be, that would be a good, um, that would be a good starting point. And so I think that, um, so let's do this real quick. I think that it only made first one only made like 3 or 400 million dollars.
It was 375 million worldwide.
Okay, so there you go. There you go. So I mean, you can expect at least 375, if not more. Um, I think this version of Spider-Man could be a whole franchise. Yeah, no, absolutely could.
Sure, totally.
Absolutely could. Because you have so many
They-
characters in this. You have Spider-Woman, you have Spider-Man 2099. You could absolutely do a whole animated movie of itself. But
Mhm.
here's the kicker. I don't think it'll be as popular. It won't be as popular because you have, even with Oscar Isaac voicing, even with an Isa Rae voicing, it wouldn't be as popular. And I think that, yeah, it would do okay. But for animation wise, people love this is what they want to see. And don't forget too, you have the whole one of the major things is Miles Morales is, you know, I mean, he's Miles Morales. I mean, he's a different, you know, what do I want to say? Not only different generation, but different ethnicity. And I think that is going to attract more people. So that in itself is a good thing. Um,
yeah.
so I could see them spinning it off, but it definitely wouldn't be as popular for sure. So, but getting back to your other question about predictions, earliest predictions, look, if it's going to make at least whatever this makes. So let's say, do you think we'll ever see the Inheritors?
What the hell is
Um,
that?
so the Inheritors are, from what I understand, they are they're like this group of people that eat, or their prey are the spider people.
Mm.
Okay, so could you see them? I maybe I think that you might see an Easter egg here or there, but I don't think it's going to be because the main mission of Beyond the Spider Verse, of course, is going to have everybody to get home. Okay, that's what. think of this movie here, okay, as um, think of this as No Way Home animated, except you're bouncing all over the place.
Mhm.
Instead of all of the villains going all over the place, all the heroes are going all over the place. Not money predictions. Oh, plot predictions. So a couple of things. Number one, I would say this. I think that the first 15 to 20 minutes of it, okay? Because look, at the end of the day, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We saw this with, Miles Morales in the first film. We saw this with Gwen Stacy in the second film. Okay. My guess is they're going to open it with Jake Johnson's character. Okay. And I'm Spider Man. My child is 4 or 5 years old, and it's going to be Spider Man, and it's going to be Gwen, or it's going to be Gwen and her crew. Okay. So after that little thing is done, then they're going to have to figure out something to um, get back to where Miles is. Once Miles is back, because you can really look at most animated or most, I won't say most, but some film, and they kind of tease where they're going.
Yeah.
So if, let's say, they're talking about, I don't know, Miles, okay, that next scene is usually of Miles,
Yeah.
okay. Um, that all being said, I think so. Then you've got him getting out. So the first act is going to be, how are they going to stop the other Miles? Because he has to go back there, he has to wreak havoc. Then they have to figure out, okay, that's not our Miles. Then you're going to have the good Miles come in and do things. So yeah, I mean, you can kind of predict it, but not totally predict it.
Yeah.
Um, if they wanted to do another trilogy, I don't know. They don't want to do that.
I yeah, I don't
Even
think they're yeah. They
yeah,
might do spin-offs, but I don't think they're going to do another
yeah,
trilogy.
they're not going to do another trilogy just because it, while this is a bankable IP, you don't want to. Every couple of years, this is going to be perfect. So they were working on this long before, you know, um, as Matthew said, this is a part one of a part two, and that's something else to take into consideration too. Okay, there have been franchises that do it really, really well, like Infinity War, like you made mention, like Harry Potter. The one franchise I think of that has not done it well is the Hunger Games. It was terrible. They ended it in the
Breaking
wrong
Dawn. I'm
place.
sorry, the Twilight films was another bad one.
And the
And then
Twilight films.
and Divergent didn't even finish its second
So
part.
yeah.
It was just like we're gonna end on
So
part one and it bombed, and we didn't even get to that second
yeah.
part.
So the fact is that if you do it well, if you know where you're going to end, and it doesn't necessarily, I mean, we got Mission Impossible coming out next month. It doesn't necessarily
Yeah.
have to be great, but it has to leave you with wanting more. And that's the key thing. Everybody wanted to see what happened to Miles, okay? And the big reveal. I mean, that being said, I
They
was kid. I said they should
they
just end the Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 with him jumping off the cliff and then go to black.
I was gonna say they practically pulled a Han Solo on us with this one with Miles Morales being taken away into a different world, and now our main characters have to scour the world to find
Yeah,
him.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
um,
But I mean, it's one of those things where uh he says, "Thanks God we never got to finish Maze Runner." Yeah.
no, we did. No, we did. Yeah, they I think they were about to split that Maze Runner into two parts, but when they saw
Yeah.
Divergent bombing, they're like, okay, no, this is one movie or that's it. We're not doing any
Yeah.
more.
Yeah,
And
I
they're like,
mean,
okay, good call.
and
So
I think that the whole Fast X thing, I mean, not only the Fast X, it's the simple premise of, you know, and I did the piece the other day where, Dwayne Johnson came out and said, "Oh, well, consider this like 10 and a half." And I just went, "Okay, so you're basically leaving, you Warner Brothers because you got shacked, okay, by James Gunn and Peter Safran, and you're going over to Universal by the way, you know, you said you would never work with them again, and Diesel's going to be a producer on the film, and you don't think there's going to be friction? And he
But they
says,
but they made up last summer.
well,
That's the
yeah,
report they said, is that
supposedly.
they made up.
And
So everything's good.
he says, oh, well, according to sources, Diesel is going to star in the film. I said, that doesn't mean he's not going to be in the film in some capacity.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked to see like a cutscene at the end. And moreover than that, where he's in the film. And I just went, come on, really?
I
This
I
is it's like this, okay? Rogue One, okay, it's like that Star Wars. I call it Star Wars 3.5, okay, because it's always that thing between Revenge of the Sith and Star Wars Episode 4. You're like, or okay, so you want to know that story? That worked. Everybody knew that the rebels got the plans, but how did they get the plans? I don't need to know all this other baloney. And him coming back. Do you think there will ever be a live action Spider Verse, or does it end? No, it's going to end with that. It's going to
I
end with that.
mean,
RO.
like we've seen franchises being milked to death, like the Jurassic World series, where it's like we should have ended when we
Yeah,
did, and they're like,
yeah.
so they'll probably
Well,
do it
I
for this one
mean,
too.
yeah, it's too much to. There's two different. It's two totally different things. Because look, animation is one thing, and then you know, um, animation is one thing, and then live action is completely different. And I think that the thing is that then you have to write a whole other script,
Yep.
and then you have to storyboard it. I mean, not to say you don't have to storyboard the animation, but it's completely all an actor or actress has to do is get in a booth, voice some lines, and that's it. When you're acting, now you have to go on set, there's location scouting, a myriad of other things there. No, he says, please don't milk it. No, I agree with you. I mean, it's just one of those things where, so the answer to that question is I would say no. Um, and, you know, so, but that's, 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 uh, that's across the Spider Verse. I think that this is going to, the actors did so well. I can't even imagine any other actors playing the role. Yeah. I mean, it's their voices too. I mean, they were animated in the booths. And so I think that's what really helped when they were doing that. And you have to have good chemistry too. If you don't have
Yeah.
good chemistry, it's not going to work. So they picked the absolute right um, people for the job, and
Yeah.
so that
You,
was good
you
to see.
you need really good chemistry. Otherwise, if you don't have good chemistry for an animated film, you get something like Shark Tale, which fucking sucked.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's across the Spider Verse. So that's the spoiler cast, and I'm definitely want to go see this, in the next coming days. So we got a couple of things. Got a couple of things coming up. Number one, we have the Mission Impossible rewatch series. I am going to be sitting down either tonight or tomorrow and watching another Mission Impossible film, and that's going to be Mission Impossible 3. And you guys are going to get this probably sometime this week. Okay. Um, Number two, the films I'm going to be doing for the Patreon, which, by the way, guys, if you want to support the channel, head on over to Patreon. You have Mob Mondays. I think I'm going to be doing Casino for Mob Mondays, and definitely Training Day for Rewatch Wednesdays. Mob Mondays is $5 a month, and then Rewatch Wednesdays is going to give you $10 a month, and you get access to both videos. Um, so that's good. If you want to, super chats are always welcome. Or if you want to become a member, and I know a couple of you are already, head on over where it says join. It's $2.99 a month. You know, it's very, very cheap. I did that deliberately because times are tough right now for a lot of people. Um, or if you want to go, I know Father's Day is right around the corner. If you want to go pick up a mug or a T-shirt at the store, that's most appreciative. Um, says Mission Impossible is going to be the best film and action film of the year. The only film that can compete with it is across. I no, I agree with you. It's going to be one of the best films. So that's going to do it for today. guys, thank you for coming. Thank you for stopping by. If you could be so nice is to leave a like or and subscribe to the channel, it would help greatly. Um, and that's going to do it. So he is Matthew Anderson. I am David Steele, and you have been watching Real Talks. Bye bye, guys.